I am Ragnar, keeper of forgotten stories. The runes speak to those who know how to listen, and I translate them for you. Today I will reveal a saga that echoes since the time of gods and warriors. Listen carefully, for every word may carry an omen. We sing songs for the heroes, for those who fall with axe in hand and the name of Odin on their lips, destined for the golden halls of Valhalla. But what of the others? And the mothers, the fathers, the sons and daughters who die on a bed of straw, taken by fever or age. The death of straw, a silent, songless fate. We believe their spirits travel to the dark Helheim. But what if there is a place that is neither? A place found on any map, whispered only by the desperate. A place to which the spirits of the death of straw are said to be drawn. A place whose name is forbidden. Today, I will tell the saga of the Vikings' forbidden island. Our story begins not with the thirst for gold, but with the weight of grief. Finn was a warrior, a man whose reputation was forged in the clash of shield walls. His laughter was as loud as his war cry, and his axe, called Ice Reaper, was feared from coast to coast. But the enemy who took what he loved most carried no sword. A winter fever, swift and cruel, took his wife Astrid. She was no shield maiden. She was a weaver, whose hands created tapestries that told the stories men like Finn lived. She died in his arms, on a bed of straw, her last breath a silent whisper. A death of straw. Finn's heart, the fortress no enemy could break, shattered. He performed the rituals, but found no comfort. The thought of Astrid in Helheim, a realm of mist and shadow, haunted him. But there was something worse, a fear that gnawed at his soul. What if she hadn't made it there? What if her spirit was lost? In his grief, Finn began to listen, not with his ears but with his heart. Whispers in the darkest taverns, snatches of drunken sailors' conversations, mentions of an island, a nameless island, hidden in a sea of perpetual fog. A place where, according to legend, the veil between the world of the living and the world of the inglorious dead was thin. A place where one could speak with the lost. Most dismissed it as a madman's tale, a heresy. To seek such a place was to defy the order of the gods. But for Finn, it was an ember of hope in the winter of his despair. He had to go. He had to know. He began searching for a crew, and he discovered that his name, once a banner of respect, was now a mark of madness. No honorable warrior would join such an unholy quest. The Jarl of his clan warned him. The Gothi, the priest, threatened him with exile. "Leave the dead alone, Finn," they said. "Your pain is poisoning your reason." Rejected, Finn was forced to search the shadows of society. He found his companions among the other dispossessed, those also bearing losses that society did not honor. His crew became a ship of ghosts, searching for other ghosts. There was Rolf, an old navigator whose eyesight was failing but who knew secret sea charts that others did not. He had lost his only son to a fishing accident. There was Brenna, a silent, fierce woman exiled for practicing herbal healing that the village considered dark magic. She sought the spirit of her younger sister, taken by a plague. And there was Olek, a young berserker whose fury in battle came not from joy, but from deep shame. His father, once a great hero, had taken his own life in despair, a death considered the most dishonorable of all. Together, they were outcasts, and together, they found a ship suited to their mission, an old Nar, a cargo ship, not a warship. It was slow and ugly, and they named it the Shadow. The Shadow. As they prepared their ship in the harbor of a distant city, a figure watched them from the docks. A man wrapped in wolf skins, with a face like it was carved from granite and eyes as cold as the ice of the north. He didn't say a word. He just watched. He was Hakon the Guardian, a zealot, a member of an ancient cult dedicated to maintaining order among the realms of the dead. To him, Finn's quest wasn't just madness. It was blasphemy that threatened the balance of the cosmos, and he wouldn't let them succeed. The Shadow sailed away with the evening tide, slipping out of the harbor like a secret. But another sail, black as a raven's wing, was hoisted in the distance. The hunt had begun. A journey at sea is a journey into the soul. Each wave that crashes against the hull tests not only the wood, but the resolve of the men. The journey of the Shadow. It was unlike any other Finn had ever made. There were no rowing songs, no tales of glory told beneath the stars. There was a heavy silence shared by people united not by an oath of loyalty, but by a common wound. Rolf, the navigator, guided them along perilous and forgotten routes, using the flight of strange birds and the color of the water as his guides. They sailed between rocky islands that resembled giants' teeth, and through stretches of sea so calm and dark they felt like sailing under a night sky. The air grew colder. The sun became a pale, watery disk in the sky, and fog began to form. A thick, gray, persistent fog that muffled sound and made the world feel small and claustrophobic. It smelled of salt, of wet stone, and of something else, the subtle scent of grave dirt. It was in the fog that they knew they were not alone. One morning, when visibility was almost nil, a sound reached them, the sound of a war horn, a single blast, long and menacing, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The sound froze the blood in their veins. It was Hakon's ship, the Iron Ox, the Iron Ox. He was hunting them in the mist. Panic threatened to overwhelm the small crew, but Finn, the old warrior, took command. "Silence," he ordered, his voice a harsh whisper. "Extinguish the lantern, oars in the water, but don't give a single stroke. Let the wind carry us." They became a ghost ship, gliding silently through the gray veil. They could hear the sounds of the other ship, the creak of its oars, the shouted orders. They were close, too close. Oleg, the young berserker, trembled, his hand on the hilt of his axe. The need to fight, to unleash his fury, was almost unbearable. Brenna, the healer, placed a hand on his arm. "Not now," she whispered. "Rage is a storm. Patience is the mountain. Be the mountain." For hours they played a deadly game of cat and mouse in the fog. The tension was as thick as the fog itself. Every creak of their own ship's wood sounded like a betrayal. Then the sound of the oars of the Iron Ox began to grow more distant. Hakon had lost them. For now, the ordeal had brought them together. Shared fear forged a bond that shared grief had only begun. They were no longer just a group of outcasts. They were a crew. The journey continued. The fog never completely dissipated. It became their constant companion, and within the fog, strange things began to happen. They heard sounds, faint whispers, just at the edge of hearing, that seemed to be the names of their lost loved ones. Rolf heard his son calling to him from the waves. Oleg heard his father's voice begging for forgiveness. And Finn heard Astrid's laughter, a sound that was both comforting and excruciatingly painful. Were they hallucinations? The effects of the fog and exhaustion? Or was the sea playing with them, using their grief as bait? Brenna, who knew the ways of the spirit, warned them. "Don't answer," she said, her eyes dark and serious. "Don't follow the voices. The sea is testing you. It's asking if your pain is stronger than your will." It was then that Rolf saw it. "A current," he murmured, pointing to the water. It wasn't a visible current, but he felt it in the way the ship moved, in the texture of the water. A current that shouldn't be here. "It's pulling us." They tried to row against it, but it was like fighting an invisible river. The current was guiding them, pulling them toward a destination they couldn't see. The mist ahead seemed to darken, as if they were approaching a landmass. And then they saw it. A shadow in the mist. A line of black rock emerging from the gray water. It was the island. It didn't appear on the horizon. It simply materialized in front of them. It was as if the island had allowed them to find it. The air suddenly became still. The wind died. The only sound was the waves gently crashing against a black pebble beach, and the silence. A deep, ancient, and watchful silence. They had reached the forbidden place, the place that didn't exist on the maps, the house of the songless dead. And when they looked back, they saw the black sail of the Iron Ox emerging from the mist, blocking their only escape route. Hakon had followed them. The trap was set. Landing on an unknown land is an act of faith. Landing on Forbidden Island was an act of desperation. Finn and his small crew ran aground. The shadow on the black pebble beach, the sound of the stones rolling under the keel sounding unholy loud in the oppressive silence. The Iron Ox Hakon's ship anchored at the mouth of the cove, a grim sentinel. They were trapped. The air on the island was cold and heavy. It smelled of brine, of wet stone, and of something else. A smell of decay, not of flesh, but of hope. The ground beneath their feet was a mixture of volcanic rock and dark earth. Vegetation was sparse and gnarled. Skeletal, leafless trees looked like bony fingers scratching at the perpetual gray sky. Pale, sickly moss clung to the rocks like a shroud. And everywhere, there were stones. standing stones arranged in patterns that seemed deliberate, but whose purpose had been lost to time. It was no place for the living. "He won't attack," Finn said, eyeing Hakon's ship. "He doesn't need to. He believes the island itself will destroy us. He's only here to ensure we don't escape." "So what do we do?" Oleg asked, his usual fury replaced by nervous apprehension. "We do what we came to do," Finn replied, his eyes scanning the desolate landscape. "We search for answers, and we do it quickly." They left 2 men to guard the ship and advanced inland, moving like shadows in a world of shadows. Silence was their most formidable enemy. It pressed on their ears, making the sound of their own heartbeats sound like a war drum. Every step felt like an intrusion. They felt they were being watched, not by eyes of flesh and blood, but by the countless eyes of time and sorrow. They found traces of others who had come before: a rusted helmet, half buried in the ground, a rotting wooden shield bearing the emblem of a long-forgotten clan, and bones, scattered, bleached by time. These were the remains of those who, like them, had come searching for something and found only their end. The sight should have terrified them, but for Finn's crew, it was a grim confirmation. They were not alone in carrying this kind of pain. Brenna, the healer, examined the soil. "Nothing grows here," she whispered, scooping up a handful of earth. "It's barren, as if the very life has been drained from it." They followed a poorly defined path that led inland, into the heart of the island. The path climbed, and they reached a wind-swept plateau, and there they saw it. A circle of stones, not rough stones like the others, but gigantic monoliths, smooth and black, arranged in a perfect circle around a central stone, shaped like an altar. The surface of the stones was covered in runes, but these were runes Finn, a learned warrior, had never seen before. They were distorted, inverted, as if mocking the sacred language. And that's where they first saw them. Spectre, the spirits. At first, they were merely distortions in the air, like heat rising from a bonfire. Then, they took form. Pale, translucent figures of men, women, and children. They wandered aimlessly among the stones, their faces empty of expression, their movements slow and purposeless. They were not at peace, and they were not in torment. They simply existed, in a state of endless apathy. They didn't seem to notice the living. They were trapped in their own silent worlds of memory and regret. Finn's crew stopped, their breath catching in their throats. It was a sight at once fascinating and deeply saddening. Rolf saw a figure that resembled his son. Oleg saw a man with his father's hunched shoulders. And Finn searched desperately for Astrid's face. "Why are they here?" Brenna whispered. "Why aren't they in Helheim?" It was then that Håkon appeared. He didn't come with an army. He came alone, stepping out from behind one of the monoliths. His presence was as cold and hard as the stones around him. "They are here because they are not worthy of another place," Håkon said, his voice the first human sound they had heard on the island besides their own. "They are the echoes of dishonor, the stain of straw death. Helheim has rejected them." "That is a lie," Finn retorted, stepping forward, his axe in his hand. "Who are you to judge the dead?" "I am not a judge," Håkon said, his icy eyes fixed on Finn. "I am the guardian, the Verder. My line has watched over this island for generations. We ensure that this contamination does not spread to the world of the living, nor to the sacred realms of the dead. We keep them contained." He pointed to the circle of stones. "This circle is not a temple. It's a cage. The runes drain their energy, their will, keeping them docile, at peace." "This isn't peace," Finn shouted, staring at the listless spirits. "This is oblivion. You're not protecting them. You're torturing them." And then he saw her. Across the circle, a translucent figure slowly turned. She had Astrid's hair the way she tilted her head, and in her ghostly eyes Finn saw a flicker of recognition and pain, a deep, unending pain. Peace was a lie. The island wasn't a sanctuary, it was a prison, and Håkon was the jailer. "You don't understand what you're doing," Finn said, his voice trembling with anger and pain. "You're desecrating their souls." Håkon smiled, a thin, cruel curl of his lips. "I understand perfectly, and that's why you and your heartbroken crew can't leave here alive. You saw what you shouldn't, and now you will join them. Your pain will feed the cage for another century." He drew a great two-handed axe from his back, the runes on its blade glowing with a cold blue light. The confrontation was no longer about escape. It was about liberation. The battle at the stone circle was a battle of two worlds. The steel of the living clashed under the silent gaze of the dead. Hakon was no mere warrior. He fought with the fury of a fanatic, his strength seeming more than human. His great axe swung in deadly arcs, each blow seeming to carry the cold weight of the island itself. Oleg, the young berserker, was the first to face him. He roared, his fury finally unleashed, and attacked Hakon with the strength of a bear. But Hakon was a rock. He parried Oleg's blow, the force of the impact sending the young man staggering back. "Your fury is born of shame," Hakon sneered. "It has no power here." He counterattacked, his axe cutting deeply into Oleg's shoulder. The young man fell, his roar turning into a groan of pain. Finn and Rolf attacked together, one on either side. They were seasoned warriors, but Hakon seemed to anticipate their every move, as if the stones themselves told him their intentions. He fought not only with skill, but with the power of the island flowing through him. As the men's battle raged, Brenna, the healer, did not fight. She stared at the circle, at the spirits, at the stone altar in the center. She watched the spirits being drawn to the circle, their pale energy slowly drained by the inverted runes. She realized that Hakon's strength did not come from him. It came from the souls he imprisoned. He was a parasite, feeding on the pain and memory of the dead to fuel his unholy duty. "Finn!" she screamed, her voice cutting through the noise of the battle. "It's the altar, the central stone. His strength comes from it. Break it." Finn heard. He stared at the altar, a black, oily stone that seemed to suck the very light. He saw the faint threads of spectral energy flowing from the souls to the stone, and from the stone to Hakon. Brenna was right. He could not defeat Hakon while the cage remained intact. He had to break the prison. He parried a savage blow from Hakon, the force making his arms ache. "Rolf! Hold him!" he shouted. The old navigator, with a war cry, threw himself at Hakon's legs, knocking the guardian down for a precious moment. That moment was all Finn needed. He ran toward the altar. Hakon roared in fury and shook off Rolf, rising to chase Finn. But Finn was faster. He leaped onto the stone altar. He looked at Astrid's spirit, who watched him with pleading eyes. And he raised his axe, the Ice Reaper. "For you, my love," he whispered, "so you can rest." And he brought the axe down with all his strength, with all his pain, with all his love, right at the center of the altar stone. The impact didn't produce the sound of steel on stone. It produced a scream. A piercing sound made of 1,000 voices released that echoed across the island and into the heavens. The altar stone shattered into 1,000 obsidian fragments. A wave of pure white energy exploded from the point of impact, throwing everyone back. The runes on the surrounding monoliths glowed brightly, and then extinguished one by one like candles in a strong wind. The cage was broken. The breaking of the altar changed everything. The energy that had been drained from souls for centuries was released all at once. It was like a dam breaking. The sky above the island, once a gray, oppressive ceiling, seemed to rip open. Light, true sunlight, penetrated for the first time in ages, bathing the stone circle in golden rays. The spirits, the specter, who had previously been pale and listless, now shone with an intense white light. They raised their heads, no longer empty, but filled with a profound peace. They were not being destroyed. They were being freed. They began to dissolve, not into dust but into particles of light that rose toward the sky like inverted rain. They were finally on their way to their final resting place. Free. Finn, fallen to the ground, watched in wonder. He saw Rolf's spirit bid farewell to his son. He saw Oleg's father give his son a wave of peace. And he saw Astrid. She stood before him, no longer translucent and suffering, but radiant and whole. She didn't say a word. She simply smiled. A smile that held all the love, all the gratitude, and all the farewell. And then, she too dissolved into light, rising to join the others. The ache in Finn's heart didn't fade, but the weight of guilt, the agony of uncertainty, did. He had freed her. He had kept his promise. Hakon, the guardian, was on his knees. The power of the island abandoned him. He was no longer a colossus of strength, but merely an old, broken man, staring at the ruins of his faith. What have you done?" he stammered, not in anger, but in genuine horror. "You broke the balance. You unleashed dishonor into the ether." "I freed souls from their torment," Finn replied, rising to his feet. The balance of the gods is stronger than your cage of fear, old man. The island, deprived of its unnatural energy, began to protest. The ground shook. The monoliths groaned and began to tilt, sinking into the barren soil. The island was crumbling, its artificial existence coming to an end. "We have to go," Brenna cried, helping the injured Oleg to his feet. They ran. They left Hakon behind, a king in a crumbling kingdom. They raced across the crumbling landscape back to the black pebble beach. Hakon's ship, the Iron Ox, had already departed, his men terrified by the destruction of the island, abandoning their master. The small crew of the Shadow. He pushed his ship into the water, rowing with desperate force as the forbidden island slowly sank into the sea, shrouded in a final haze, as if the world were trying to erase its own memory of the place. They sailed away. The last thing they saw was the top of the tallest monolith disappearing beneath the gray waves. Thus ends another saga that echoes in the shadows of time. The gods write stories in the winds, but it is up to us to keep them alive. Finn and the survivors of the Shadow, they returned to the world of men. They brought no gold or glory. They brought back a story no one would believe, and they did not tell it. It was a knowledge they held in their hearts, a shared scar. They parted, each going their own way, no longer as outcasts, but as people who had faced the abyss of their grief and found a kind of peace. Finn never lifted an axe in battle again. He became a storyteller, a skald, ensuring that the stories of the silent, the forgotten, would also be sung. And the world forgot the Forbidden Island. Hakon and his cult vanished, a footnote in the great song. But I ask you, what is stronger? The faith that builds walls to contain what we fear, or the love that tears them down? Perhaps true honor lies not in how we die, but in how we remember those we love. If you wish to hear more tales of courage, betrayal, and glory, stay with me, Ragnar, for there are still many secrets of the Vikings to be revealed.